In our current society, we have a whole bunch of sectors that all work together to make the South African economy what we know it. The creative arts sector is something that is constantly overlooked or maybe undermined. We have a really important guest on our ECAfrica podcast this week, and so I hope that you'll enjoy our conversation with Marcus Mabusela as we dive into the film sector and what it takes to be an entrepreneur in our current climate. We looked at some of his favorite tidbits that he's been told, what it takes to start a business and make it flourish, and also we learned a little bit about his background. I hope that you guys will enjoy the episode.
Hello there, I am Marcus Mabusela. I'm an actor, vocal coach, performance coach, podcaster, entrepreneur, producer, and I am very happy to be at the ECAfrica premises where we're having conversations around African entrepreneurs creating solutions for Africa. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taynita, and you are listening to the ECAfrica podcast. I'm so excited to bring this next round of guests to you. We're going to be focusing on entrepreneurship, on business building, on South African networks, on African networks, but above all of that, we're going to be looking at doing good business. And so today's guest is someone I'm really excited to have on. He's a friend of ECAfrica. He's been interviewed by us a few times. We have Marcus Mabusela with us. Marcus, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for calling me. Thank you for the invite.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
You'll see this time we're doing things a little bit different. Yeah. We're focusing more on entrepreneurs, on business people that have inspired us. Definitely. But we also think people who have really good stories to share. Yeah. So I'm excited to get into this conversation.
I am so excited. Thank you, Tay. Thank you so much.
So I feel like saying, for those of you guys who don't know Marcus, but I feel like you've become a familiar face for a lot of people. Yeah. You've been on so many different ads, so many different TV shows. But do you want to give us a quick little background about how you got started into acting and also the transition from the corporate world to acting?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for the invite. Well, basically, my journey started when I received a learnership from a multinational IT company. I was still young, straight from high school, and I saw it as an opportunity. Obviously, I come from a disadvantaged background, so my parents could not afford to take me to university. So as soon as I got the acceptance letter from Siemens, it was, to do an IT learnership for a 2-year program, I jumped at it and I gave it everything I had. The program went smoothly, and I did my practicals with them. And then I was taken up by a bank, to do support for a bank, corporate banking. And that's when I learned networking and working with the servers. And as I was kind of growing, into the space, and I was in corporate banking for about 4 to 5 years, and comes a point, I think, as a professional where you have to consider where your future will lie, because as you specialize more and more, you have to choose which direction that you'll be taking. But I had this voice inside of me, that said that I kind of belonged elsewhere. The period in which I was there in the IT and corporate banking space was a learning period for me, and that's not so much a place where I would stay. So, this voice grew louder, and that's when I kind of decided to interrogate it and kind of investigate what my purpose is, what my strengths are. So it took me about a year to kind of just figure it all out and remember, where my talents lie, because, obviously IT is a very good skill to learn. And especially at the time, there was a high demand of IT professionals who were very proficient, and that I was. And just when I was about to get into the next stage of my career, I had to make that decision because, I was at a point where it's either I go forward or, I make the change, because now, obviously, with a bigger paycheck comes more demands. So I just made the decision. I remember I went to the Market Theatre to go see some shows there. I just needed to cool off my head. And I saw a show that was done by the late Brahuma Sigela, directed by James Ngobo. At that time, they had the late Mamsbongile Khumalo, the late Gloria Bosman, and a host of other phenomenal performers. And, it's when I saw that show, that musical, it was a musical called Songs of Migration. And Brahu was, infusing a lot of the music that he'd created while he was in exile to kind of explain the story of migration in South Africa and how it changed the political landscape and also the economic landscape, and also relations between families, because now that the father figure was taken away from we were taken away from our families back in the day, and you'd find that women were left in the rural areas without any money that's coming in because the men have either been in jail, or they're unable to pay money, or there's so many things that were happening in Johannesburg, but anyway, so that story really inspired me. It really inspired me, and I felt like this is what I have to do for my life. This is what I want to do. And I remember I saw the director afterwards, James Ngobo, which I think we spoke briefly, and Brahu. After a year, I went and approached the Market Theatre. I had a program, a theatre program, and I decided actually this is really where I want to put my efforts at. And I know a lot of people, discouraged me because I said, no, man, there's no money. How could you leave a comfortable job in corporate IT and want to do this? But something just compelled me, that this is what I want to focus on. And funny enough, as I was there at the Market Lab, there was a new artistic director that was being appointed at the institution, at the Market Theatre. And it just so happened that the new artistic director was the gentleman who was directing Brahu's show, which was James Ngobo. They were business partners. So I was like, oh my gosh, my idol is now the head of this institution. So I basically stalked him. I basically stalked him every moment I got. I just wanted to talk to him and share with him my ideas of fusing theater with online and digital strategies to make it work, and how we can make money. Now that I'm older, I kind of think that actually wouldn't have worked. But I was so enthusiastic every time I saw him that he took a liking in me, and he started mentoring me. I remember we were doing some shows and I would be his assistant. And the real reason is because he wanted me to get a first-hand account of what goes on behind the scenes of this business. Because many times I think as performers, as creatives, we focus on the spotlight and where it shines, but the real magic happens behind the camera, behind closed doors. And he gave me the privilege, I had the privilege of being in those conversations behind closed doors and understanding how things work, behind the scenes. And I think the experience that I had with him also helped me to have a long-term kind of, outlook on the space. So many creatives, so many actors have these massive booms where, there's a lot of fame and money thrown at them, and then they're unable to sustain their careers on the long run. So being with he's old enough to be my father, and that's how I saw him. And, he could kind of, give me the tricks of the trade, from a man who's walked the path. And obviously all I had to do is try and make those nuggets, applicable to the time that we're in now. And yeah.
Perfect. I love how you've given us a really good run through of your journey, because I think so much of ECAfrica is birthed from the creative sector, right? So JT Communications has the African Resource Center. We've worked with people like the late Brahu, like the late Auntie SK, I'm going to call her because that's the name we called her. But these really big legacy brands. And we've been able to see theatres grow, open, close. We've been able to see actors rise and fall, like you've said. And I wanted to know, where do you see business and the creative arts intersecting? Because I think for so long we've been advocating as creatives that this is a proper business, right? It should be looked at the same way. It should be respected the same way, but it's sometimes pushed on the sidelines. And so how have you intersected those two worlds? Because you've come from a corporate world, gone into the creative sector, and now transitioned into your own production, your own business. And so how do you see those worlds merging?
Well, I mean, one thing that someone once said is, if there's anything about each and every brand that's ever been created in this world, any brand, the one common denominator is a story.
Right.
Is the story. And that's where the arts come in. That's where the culture comes in. We articulate the aspirations of a business, and that's the role we play. You can be there in the factory creating the product. We tell the story of the product. We are the mouthpiece of, and that's why, you'd find a lot of creatives are working hand in hand with sort of like the marketing of a brand, how to tell the story of the brand and relate it to its audiences and its consumers. But just going back to my story, I think one thing that really stuck out for me was not just the fact that James Ngcobo was directing Breshu Masekela's play, but it was the fact that they were a company. It was Breshu Masekela, the late. It was James Ngcobo, and it was also Mam Olisa Mbongeni Ngema. Mam Olisa Ngema, who's currently the CEO of the Joburg theaters. And they were a company, and they were touring these shows across the world. The company was called Sibojama. And that for me was something that I found very interesting, that they are working as a unit, and they're making it possible. They're entering corporate spaces, they're entering cultural spaces, they're entering diplomatic spaces. And I knew that's what I want to do. I want to be able to have a functioning entity that's able to penetrate these different spaces and generate income for the people who are working for us, for families, because I think that's the role of, a leader in business. You take that position to kind of create a way for other people and other families. So yeah, I think that's really what attracted me to this particular mentor at that age, was the fact that, man, not only is he an artistic genius, but he's able to fuse that so well with business. Yeah.
So one of the things we're really passionate about here is generational wealth building, but also the connectedness between generations. So being mentored, being taught, sharing of ideas. And so I wanted to know, I think that sometimes people think that the business journey is a very linear process. You start, you maybe stumble a bit, and then you get to the end of selling or having this legacy brand or closing, if that's what it's going to be. And so something at ECAfrica that we really focus on is the need of entrepreneurs. And so obviously we have our resource bank, and we really think that there's different resources that people should use. But I wanted to know, where do you see this conversation storytelling working in a new South Africa, in a place where the business landscape is so different, in a space where a lot of these landscapes were white dominated, and now there needs to be a transfer of skills between different generations, between different people, because like you're saying, you watched this company tour and you know that you want to get there, but how do you get there, and how do you think other entrepreneurs can start building their businesses with a legacy brand in mind and not just a survivalist brand in mind?
You see, and thank you for the question. I think that's the dynamic thing about the creative space. So my model, the model for my business is not the same as theirs was. I mean, they were in the theater space, and that's what they created. And although that's where I started, that's not my story. I made a conscious choice to say, the film space is where I'm going to plant my feet, my feet. And it's because I saw the exponential growth which the South African film sector has had over the past decade, even less than that. I mean, just last year, we crossed about 1.5 billion rands into the economy. And I think that's pretty good, We've employed a whole lot of people, and I know there's a lot of potential within that space. Do you know that we have access to about 1 billion people in this continent alone, because South Africa has been seen as a mouthpiece for the rest of the continent? And you find that these streaming companies, although they've invested quite a lot, Netflix only has 1.8 million subscribers in the whole of Africa. 1.8 million in a market that's got about 1 billion people. So you see the potential that lies there. In fact, Showmax, not Netflix, Showmax is the biggest streaming platform in Africa with 2 million subscribers. And even with that, you can see that the potential is so massive. So I think, we have to kind of change the way we see things and how we look at things, and find a way, I think, as Africans, as custodians of our own culture now, to say, okay, fine, how do we package this culture? How do we package, brand South Africa, brand Africa in all its diversity? And how do we distribute it? How do we identify people who want this brand? Because there's still a lot of interest in our country, not even mentioning the continent as a whole, with all its diverse cultures, all its diverse religions, and I think that's really what intrigued me, is the the desire to create a palatable brand, a brand in which anyone from around the world can consume and relate to, but that is still intrinsically and South African. That's the thing for me.
Perfect. I like what you said of, it is important for how we package it, right? Because you've had these big productions from Avengers to the Maze Runner to these really big Hollywood productions that have decided to maybe use the landscape or the actors or the talent. And if they're packaging it that way, and if they're able to monopolize on that, how do we as Africans shift that narrative? How do we take charge of that? So when people think of Africa, they don't just think of Wakanda, which is actually not a real place.
No, it's not, guys. Trust me, it's not.
Which is not a real place, but has drawn from real people, right? We were able to see South African culture showcased. We were able to see Nigerian culture showcased. And so while it was so beautiful and so special and so poignant, there was a part of me that felt like, why hadn't we been the ones to do that? Why weren't we the ones who took our stories to the world stage? So I really like how you've said that it is time for us to package it and disseminate it in a way that's beneficial to us, because we're the youngest continent in the world. And so the potential that you've spoken about is big. Exponential. There's so much that we could do. But even with the storytelling, 2 million people to 1 million people.
That's...
But what is the TikTok following? What is the social media following? Because it's not like Africans are not using social platforms. We're maybe just not using the traditional ones that people see us.
So true. And
so I guess this just transitions me into, why have you decided to base your business in the creative sector? Why have you decided to start a podcast? What are you seeing? Why have you decided that this is an important space to fill?
I think, to be honest with you, I can sit here and try and sound smart and say, I decided because I saw a gap in the market, but actually the decision was more one that was made from the inside out. It really was because of a call of my purpose, to find what my purpose is. And at my core, I'm a storyteller, and I had to find how to make this purpose work in the current landscape in the world that we're living in, and how I can create most impact in the community around me and the world around me. And, obviously as someone, who comes from an entrepreneurial background with my family, the one question was, what problems can I solve? And that's where the entrepreneur in me kicked in. By profession, I'm an actor, I do voiceover work, I speak, but as an entrepreneur, my goal is to solve problems. And what we're trying to do with the Film Biz Show, our podcast, is start a conversation where everyone who is in the ecosystem of the filmmaking business, I won't call it an industry, I'll say the business. And I'll tell you why. It's because I think in South Africa, we have not come to a point where it's a fully fledged business. Industry, because we haven't fully industrialized it. There's still much regulations that has to be done. across the board. There's still a lot of work that has to be done in SA. And that's where the inspiration for starting the podcast came, to say we need to start these conversations. Just last week we've had a lady who's part of the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa. Now that we're going to the elections, and we wanted to have a conversation around policy, around rallying creatives and filmmakers, behind the cause of creating content. That's good, creating content that propagates and pushes young people to stand up and take voting seriously.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that we can see that businesses, wherever their industry is, whatever sector they come from, we're all feeding into the centralized economy, right? We're all feeding into the betterment of South Africa, the world. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the one question I really love to know from the entrepreneurs, from the business owners that we have on here, what are some of the things that you think we can do better as entrepreneurs in South Africa and on the continent? And maybe what are some of the things you think that we need more of?
I mean, definitely, I think, entrepreneurs, especially in South Africa, we need more exposure. I think, the legacy of apartheid is a very sad one. Yeah. That kept us within our corner, it kept us enclosed. And we're very surprised when everyone is so obsessed about South Africa, when they're so excited about us. Because we're like, whoa, where did these guys come from, And I think the rise of Mapiano was one such example. Everyone was so surprised that people are consuming our culture, the way they are. And it's not, this has been happening. It's just that it's happening on a grander scale because things have opened up. Brahu and them, they created huge success in the United States in the 70s during the, the struggle in America for black rights.
Civil rights movement.
So we were very much, an influential voice, especially when it comes to activism. And now that times have changed, people are really consuming, especially our music, at high volumes. So that lets you know that there is an interest. But I think one thing we need as South Africans is to be exposed more, to see what other people are doing, get a sense of how other cultures are moving. And yes, we do have access to internet, which is great, but I think we need to also open up our, open up our horizon, open up our view, and try and see what other countries are doing. Because when those foreigners come to SA and they want to engage with South Africans, many a times they realize how our attitude is, towards business. And they're able to, and this is like quite a sensitive issue. But I find that sometimes when you find entrepreneurs from the outside wanting to make business in South Africa, it becomes as if they're just trying to extract and leave. Right. Extract and leave. And it's incumbent upon us as local entrepreneurs who will be partnering with them to make sure that, these dealings that we're having with international partners are going to somehow plow back within, our communities, So definitely we need to be more exposed. I think we need to open up ourselves to the way things are happening internationally. In South Africa, we've got a lot of potential, a lot of talent, a lot of resources are here. But we have to think of ourselves as global citizens and not just within one corner of the world.
No, I love that. I think, it's so... I sometimes think that we as Africans, and myself included, I sometimes forget how great we are. We have some of the coolest emerging economies. True. We have Rwanda, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Senegal, many... I mean, Egypt, beautiful, right? COP was just in Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Before...
where was it? It was in Ivory Coast now.
See?
Yeah.
And I mean, South Africa went to the ICJ. We have Rwanda being one of the cleanest places in the world. In the world.
Yeah.
We have Nigeria and Nollywood who are just breaking every barrier. We have South African music with Tyler, or even just talent with Trevor Noah, and all these like, I guess, exports of really cool people who are shining our light across the world. And so I love when you said, like, sometimes we get a little bit surprised, but like, where did you come from?
Whoa.
But I think that exposure is so important. And like you said, there's so many different ways you can do that. Maybe travel, maybe Google it, maybe make friends who are multicultural, go into businesses that are multicultural. So I really, really enjoy that. But you touched on something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are currently trying to figure out, right? Because I'm really lucky. I'm a second generation entrepreneur, which is so special.
So special,
especially
right?
as a woman of color, especially in South Africa. I feel really blessed. And I think there's a whole bunch of us, like you said, you come from an entrepreneurial legacy. A lot of us who have had to shift and pivot since COVID. So maybe our parents did it a certain way, or the business existed in a certain way. But you touched on partnerships, and so doing business with each other. I think something that is a little bit uncomfortable for entrepreneurs to talk about is that negotiation stage, is that advocating for yourself. And so not to delve into your partnerships or my partnerships, but what are some of the things that you think somebody needs to look out for when they're going into this?
I think when going into partnerships, firstly, guys, it's very important to have a lawyer. Get a lawyer. It just makes life so much easier. Within every partnership, I mean, what I did actually, before I get to that, I got a young lawyer, an advocate who he met him through a friend. I told him about my business and how I need someone by my side. And we worked out an arrangement. Whenever I need him, he's there to, draft contracts for me, to try and, sort out any kind of standings for me legally. And because of the nature of the business that I'm in, I would pay him when, there's something there to pay, and we kind of work it out on an invoice base. But, maybe other entrepreneurs can work it out differently. But for me, that's the way that it kind of helped me to get to where I am. When it comes to partnerships, it's good and well, we have an idea or we see an opportunity. It's great for us to say, well, let's go for it. But if it isn't written down in black and white, to say what each party is bringing to the table, how the proceeds of our hard work will be kind of shared, and the different clauses that kind of will dictate the relationship, then I think, it becomes a bit murky. So very important to have a legal advisor next to you in all your dealings, because people take advantage that as a creative, you might be a bit irresponsible when it comes to this. So that's what I learned, always have a legal advisor.
I love that. And I think it's really transparent, right? It is, we are doing business, but we had a conversation outside of this, and we were just saying that as much as it is business, it also is personal. A lot of us are coming from family-owned businesses, or we're trying to build these legacies, and so it's not just business at the end of the day. And I really appreciate that. And I think coming back to that, like extraction, coming back to that, it's a trend that we see across the continent, right? That there are a bunch of multinationals moving in, and so how do we as Africans, as South Africans, advocate for ourselves in a way that allows for investment and growth and all these lovely, lovely words that you hear? But how do we do so in a sustainable way that will see this economy growing and other economies growing as well? So before I let you go, something that I really think is so interesting is, I'm going to ask you two questions, but I'll ask you the first one. Sure. Are there any entrepreneurs or businesses that you follow their stories that are inspirational to you right now? Anybody that you think we should be on the lookout for? I just think it's very exciting. I mean, the big ones like Tesla, Amazon, all of that, but I'm sure that there's people in your space that I haven't heard of. So is there anything that you think is really cool right now?
Well, for me, I mean, the one entrepreneur that stands out, although he's in a different space than I am, but as someone who's grown exponentially, who started out, first time I got introduced to this gentleman, he was doing, the Dragon's Den, which is a business show, right? An entrepreneurial show where people come and pitch and venture capitalists invest in ideas. And from there, he's just grown. He started his podcast, and he's just become a household name. Stephen Bartlett, that's his name. He does the podcast called Diary of a CEO. Yeah, definitely. I'm a huge fan of that guy, and he really inspired me to start my own podcast, because starting a podcast that focuses on the business of film, which is what I'm absolutely obsessed about, placed me not only as a voice but as a thought leader within the space. To say he's that guy that knows what happens in the whole ecosystem. He's got an idea. He might not know everything, but he knows what the production accountant does. He knows what the financier does, the bonder does. He knows what the actor does, what the gaffer does, what the sound person, and being in a position where you are known as a thought leader does give you an advantage when it comes to networking, gives you an advantage when it comes to navigating the space. And that's someone who's really inspired my current, the direction that I've taken. I think another company that I find I love small companies, especially small production companies that are able to do big work. So Kalahari Pictures, which is based in Cape Town, ran by Michael Murphy. He's a LA-born producer who's based in Cape Town, and they produced District 9, which was a huge success. I think they raised about $30 million US. And for the American film landscape, that's little money, but for us, it's a lot of money. That's almost like 600 million, for that film. And they were able to create a success out of it. So there's people like that who've been able to create magic on the soil, and I'm not taking anything away from the greats like Trevor Noah, like Charlize Theron, who are able to leave the shores and be great, exports. But I also like to give flowers to people who have made it here at home. And those stories became so big that the whole world had to listen. So that's definitely one. I'm touched by a story like that of Thuso Mbetu, a phenomenal actress who was just compelled by a voice that was in her, to say, we there's bigger and there's better, there's more, and she does it out of a place of servitude to the world and humanity. Trevor Noah obviously is a huge example of what it takes to be tenacious in this business. It's a tough space to be, but I feel like we're at a place where so much is happening. There's so many opportunities, and we just have to grab them and fly with them. Yeah.
Perfect. I love those. We're such fans of Stephen Bartlett. I think he was one of the youngest dragons to go in, which is very cool.
Very cool.
But also I'm gonna go look at that production company that you said.
Kalahari Pictures. Yeah.
I just loved hearing about good things that people are doing on the ground, like you're saying.
Definitely.
And then my last question to you before we leave is, what is one piece of advice that you would give an entrepreneur, be it small, big, whatever industry they're in? What is some of the best advice you've been given that you would give out again?
Good question. I think my advice to entrepreneurs out there would be just start. Don't think too much about it. Don't try and make it perfect. Just start. And once you've started, that's when you'll be able to learn the lessons that you need to learn in order to make it, the product or the service that you want it to be. Because if you don't start, it's just an idea. And ideas cannot be considered copyright. And what we're talking, when we talk about intellectual property, those are ideas that have been able to be put into material form. So once you start your idea, once you take action, that's when it's in material form, and that's when it's an intellectual property, and there's value in what you've created. So my advice would be for entrepreneurs just to take the first step, and the next, and the third, and the other. And no matter how tough the journey might be, which very often becomes very tough, you just keep putting one step in front of the other. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcus, for coming on our show again. Thank you for
so
being
much.
a friend of ECAfrica and watching us grow and change. I think you're such a perfect example of what we want to do with this network, of people who are doing really cool things, really dynamic things in the spaces that they're in. So we're always so excited to speak to you. I'm always so chuffed to learn and see what you're doing. And every time you pop up on my screen, I'm like, oh, it's Marcus, which is always very, very exciting. So thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. You can find us on ECAfrica everywhere. And Marcus, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook, all the platforms as Marcus Mabusela. Marcus Mabusela, you'll see it written. And also you can find me on YouTube, Spotify, and all the podcast platforms as the Film Biz Show. That's the Film B-I-Z Show. And just like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button, and you can be, you can be one of our audience members, and you can see the great work that we're doing. We also have plans to go into the training space to try and get young people who are aspiring to be filmmakers, content creators, to train you and give you accredited training on the skill sets that are needed for creating your own work.
Stunning. Thank you so much. And we can't wait to see what you guys are going to be doing.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you, Tay.